How do I sound?
You sound pretty good. A little faint. Can you say more about
I
what you
can
had for lunch today?
say more. Do I sound less faint now?
Yeah, you sound
No?
good.
All right.
Yeah.
That's a rare could you turn up the volume to me? I just feel I haven't had that very frequently in my life, frankly.
In the whole life.
In my whole life.
Yeah, we
Yeah, I
can
feel like
barely hear you, Brian. Right,
I
exactly.
just not something I'm used to hearing opposite of that. Namely,
Yeah.
we can't hear anything else. So can you please like put a sock in it?
Yeah, for
Can you
once.
and as you know, Adam, my co-founder and I are both perhaps loud. And I think our respective spouses get a little sick of us when we are on the phone to one another, especially late in the evening. I feel that Katie and Bridget would find common cause in
I,
buying a muzzle for both of us.
I'm worried that Steve is losing his hearing because he keeps talking louder and louder and louder, like
Oh,
every day.
is this a conversation where we talk about Steve? Is this like the chat -1 where we talk about Steve? Or is he the Mick
Yeah, I mean,
Jagger now? Are we?
he doesn't really listen to the show much, I choose to believe. So,
He might be listening right now. Not
yeah.
impossible. Listen, I'm not gonna. I am just excited that I was told to turn up my own volume. I really want to just ask in that. The apple has not fallen far from the tree. I mean, obviously, my kids are all I got 3 kids. They're all very different from one another. My daughter is definitely maybe is inherited that the loud gene.
That would make sense because I knew you weren't talking about your sons because I definitely have to like lean in to hear them at all.
Is very quiet. As I've often said, if there's a way to say something in 5 words, he'll use 4. I mean, he's just very very quiet.
Yeah, succinct.
Very succinct. And my daughter really does not fall into that category and is delightfully loud. What I also loved, especially, her preschool parent-teacher conferences were great because the preschool teachers, no preschool teacher wants to be really critical of your kid unless they're trying to burn the place down. And so they're trying to find all these euphemisms for loud. And they're like, she's very joyful, very exuberant. She's very, and Bridget was like, she's very loud. Like, oh God, she's so loud. She's so loud. God, she's loud. She is so loud. I'm like, yeah, she's loud. My daughter, she's loud. We don't get told to turn off the volume very frequently, but here we are. So it's good to be back. We had a little bit of a hiatus.
Yeah.
And I think we've got some more. Is the plural of hiatus hiati?
Gotta be hiatuses.
Hiatuses.
We'll get back to you on that, folks.
I feel like whatever it is, I've been pronouncing it wrong my entire life. But I think I know we're going to be a little bit spotty here in the spring. Just got various conflicts coming up. You're traveling, and then we got an event here in San Francisco. So we're trying to make every episode count. We got to take advantage of it. And worth describing how we got here. I mean,
yeah. So you posted on Twitter. Was it 2-3 weeks ago?
Yeah. Well, this was an earnest apology. I actually this really did start with me howling in the office when I got a plot to do exactly what I wanted it to do.
I mean, in fairness, you had a very nice looking plot.
I don't disagree. I know. I felt it was. I was very excited about my plot. Adam, you there?
Yes. I share your plot excitement. No.
Okay,
I share your plot excitement.
No. Okay. So let me. Do you accidentally close the wrong tab in Chrome ever?
No, I solved this by never closing any tab in Chrome ever.
Okay, so that's I have to solve the problem that way, but then you end up with, let's say too many tabs. I got so sick of accidentally walking out of a meeting that I was trying to, where you go to look something up in another tab, and then you want to return to the meeting, and you hang up on people. You've done this?
No. I use the Meet app, which actually pulls it out into a different command queue domain or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I don't have that specific fear. I do often have random YouTube videos just starting to play in random tabs and am completely unable to find them.
It is amazing how few meeting mishaps we've had over basically 4 years of remote meetings. You would think there'd been some really serious mishaps, but we've had very, very few. There have been some, but very few. But I got so sick of doing this that then I meant to do it on this, but I've now done it. Have you ever pinned a tab?
Pinned a tab. Didn't know that was a thing.
If you right click on a tab in Chrome, you can pin it.
Wow.
And it is, and then it goes to the far left, and then it won't hang. Then you can't accidentally hang up on it. It's
Mind
really
blown.
right.
Yeah.
I felt the same way when because finally I'm like, I think maybe it's time to spend like 45 seconds trying to solve this problem. I've done this enough times that I really need to try to not accidentally close tabs. Anyway, my paranoia was in an attempt to pin this tab, I just hung up on it. So I had this moment, like, am I alone in the universe? But no, here we are, and now the tab is pinned. So I just want everyone to know for answering more questions that nobody asked. So yeah, I got this plot, and so and we'll drop a link to the tweet there in the chat. And then I kind of joked last week that like we're going to be out last week because I was on the road, but it would have just been about GNU plot anyway. Laura had a response, do it, you won't, which of course, I mean, in my household means you actually have to do, you're now honor bound to do whatever it is you're being told to not do. And I'll upload the GNU plot control file to this, but it did kind of kick me off on like, I like to talk about data visualization. I know Charlie's here, who we got a couple of other folks who are interested historically in data visualization. And I kind of wanted to talk about a bunch of different things, not just a love letter to GNU plot, though I think we got to do a little bit of that. Do you use GNU plot much, Adam? Are you?
Not so much. So I am embarrassed to say that a lot of the time, I mean, this will not surprise you, I'm in Excel or Google Sheets doing my data visualization insofar as you can call it that. I wouldn't be able to do this level of sophistication, I hasten to point out.
Well, so I think I think I'm curious what most software engineers do for this problem. And I think like that's a pretty reasonable solution is like I pull it into a spreadsheet and I use don't you think that I mean, surely whenever I'm in like the spreadsheet graphing functions, I'm like, I must be missing much larger. I mean, this can't be it for options where it seems like I feel like I'm looking at like Harvard graphics in terms of the options circa like 1989.
Yeah, totally.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure that's just me. I'm sure
just in terms of like the level of sophistication of ways of expressing data. Yeah, I think it's like, yeah, but I think it's like, simple tools for simple minds like mine, and I think like, actually, one of the places where I have had some success with ChatGPT, as I've mentioned, I've had many failures, was with GNU plot, like helping a brother out in terms of getting GNU plot to do what I wanted it to do.
Yes. Yeah, it is. In fact, are you trying to like, is this like an alley-oop? Or are you just are you making fun of me?
Oh, no, not at all. I thought you were just GNU plot fluent. Like you've been, spreading the good news about GNU plot for years.
Yeah, I have been spreading the good news about GNU plot, but I'm always willing to, pour over a GNU plot like a Talmudic scholar. There's always something else you can learn from the sacred texts. No, I find it to be, because I mean, the thing I do find annoying about GNU plot, it's idiosyncratic. I mean, it's got some super weird things that are, it's like well implemented, but some of the interfaces are just like really counterintuitive. And then it also got very too into abbreviating things. So when you have GNU plot, you have a script that basically, and you can do it interactively as well, which I also find to be very useful. Then you can have a GNU plot script that generates output. It's too tied to the terminal that you do. So like if different terminals have got different options and those are important. I generally always use a PDF terminal, which is kind of ridiculous, but I find that gives me the most fine-grained control. But I don't retain a lot of that. I actually do need to go back to my old GNU plot, which I've kind of retained a lot of. I've retained a lot of the old GNU plot. And I have found that ChatGPT is really good for GNU plot. So you've used ChatGPT for GNU plot?
Yes. No, I've used it for GNU plot. Yeah, it's one of the, like, I mean, I think I've told you about this, but it's one of the situations where ChatGPT didn't like troll me and tell me it was working overnight on something, and in the morning say, "What are you talking about?" It actually gave like useful advice.
Yeah, I think it's really good, and I think then and this in part because the GNU plot documentation is good. It's weird. Again, it's like a GNU plot itself in that it's just odd. It's not the way that I would necessarily structure a program or kind of think to structure something. So there are the set command, for example, which does a lot of lifting in GNU plot, or the plot command. The set command ends up being whatever it is, 80 pages long in the manual, but it actually is thoroughly documented. And it's good. So that's interesting to know that you're using ChatGPT, because that's what I've done as well, and I found it to be really useful, especially when you're doing a new kind of plot. So the plot that I had is a box plot, and I'm trying to represent. I've got you're doing 20 runs of a thing, and I want to express all of that data, but you obviously want to express those middle quartiles more, and that's what a box plot by default allows you to do. So you can see the entire range of data. You've got those middle quartiles, and then the thing I do love, this is like the kind of weird thing that GNU plot allows you to do, is like I really wanted to lay the legend out in a particular way. So I'm like, I really want, because I'm really trying to kind of present multiple dimensions of data, and that's what I was really elated to find that I could do. I'm like, oh my god, they've got an option for it. They just seem to have an option for lots and lots of things, and historically the problem was its approachability. So that's what I definitely think I'm very pro ChatGPT for it, and good to hear that I'm not the only one.
Yeah, I mean, I a little off topic, but folks in the chat mentioned LaTeX. Another one I found is JQ, in terms of like incredibly rich vocabularies of expression that ChatGPT is terrific for assisting with.
Okay, that's really interesting. Because JQ and I have not yet used ChatGPT for JQ, but I should, because JQ and we just don't get along.
I feel the same way. I feel like whatever I remember JQ, however I remember it working, is not the way it works the next time I pick it up. Right? Like I'm like, oh, I can do this, no problem. And like, this is a part 2, and like 7 tries later, I'm still fumbling around.
Totally. And I should also use ChatGPT on JQ, because I just feel like I'm always fumbling around. I'm never doing the right thing with that. And I think that this is, and Troy, I want to get you in here as well, because I feel like, there are different reasons to visualize data. And the one that I'm kind of most immediately interested in is not necessarily like the presentation of data, which I think is also important. But where you're trying to present an insight that you've already had, and you're trying to kind of present that visually. But I'm actually trying to get insight. Like I'm trying to look at this data, and I'm looking for a pattern that I think is interesting. And you need that kind of that interactivity. I don't know, Troy, what do you
absolutely.
What do you think about it?
No, absolutely. And let me know if my mic is off or if you can't hear me. But yeah, I think data visualization is great for those, both for just like you said, I've had this insight and I want to share it, or I'm looking for some insight. I don't know what question to ask. I think visualizations are always useful for either presenting a question that you want the data to show, or then helping you identify what those questions are. And I think that it's those are both. I find all sorts of tools are really useful for that. Honestly, it's I don't know, maybe anathema to say it, but I think even something like Excel or Google Sheets can be useful as a data visualization tool if you hook up conditional formatting and stuff like that, so that you can highlight data and say, oh, you run those quick queries. And just like you said, sort of like the OODA loop, what is it? Observe, orient, decide, act, and then the shorter you can make those cycles, the more success you can have, the more insights you can have, the more questions you can ask, and the more answers you can uncover. So I think, that speed of implementation and iteration is really critical for that.
I have not heard of the OODA loop. What's the?
Seriously?
Seriously? Are you going to be?
No, seriously. I am astounded, just because I feel like there was a period, I'm going to say like 2015 to 2019, where I feel like 30% of technical talks first defined the OODA loop and then told you how you had to optimize it. Charlie, back me up here.
No, totally. I was thinking 5 years ago, and then
Really?
Yeah, it was like super hype. Everyone wanted to tell you how OODA loop was important, and they're not wrong, but it was nomenclature. I'm just surprised that it didn't
So is this
that
like you feel this is like I haven't heard of microservices. Like I'm hearing about microservices.
it's yeah, no, I mean, roll back the clock, whatever it was, 10, 15 years when I was trying to figure out how to pronounce GitHub. And you were being very patient with me. Yes.
I wasn't going to
like
go
a
there.
hub for Git. You were merely thinking it. I appreciate it.
I was going to do you the courtesy of having that be a private moment. But as long as we're talking about that, when the okay, so do you think it's at that level where I
don't know, maybe.
So this is in 2010, and I was mentioning GitHub. Now you're like, wait, what? Do you know how ridiculous you sound? I'm like, what do you mean how ridiculous? I'm like, on GitHub. You mean like, I just remember so vividly be like, do you mean like a hub of Git? I'm like, I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's a website, man. I don't know what to tell you. It's like, yes, I don't know. I didn't name it. I thought like Google was a stupid name too. So I don't know. Like, yeah, it's a. But so you think it's at that level? Are you embarrassed for me that I haven't heard of it, or are you?
No, I'm amazed that you were not like some algorithm somewhere was not showing you the same TED Talks or whatever. And this is like terminology that I think comes out of the Air Force, where like the pilots are supposed to observe, orient, decide, act in terms of like threat.
I mean, I'm not like, I don't object to it at all. I don't feel like I would have been I feel like this is a gap. I don't know what happened. I mean,
I don't know. Right. Unicorns are mythical. Like, why did no one tell me this? Right.
That's right.
Just kind of leaked through in your psyche.
Oh my God. Just because not everyone are a bunch of Gen Xers around here, Adam, you're making reference to a superlative, This American Life, that we need to go dig up. Assume, right? I mean, that's
yes, absolutely.
There's a This American Life of people who take misconceptions into adulthood, and a woman describes getting to college and being with a bunch of people, and unicorns come up in conversation, and she just says how sad it is that the unicorn is so endangered. And everyone kind of like laughed. It's kind of like a weird joke. And then there's this moment where everyone looks at her and they realize like, wait a minute, she's not laughing at all. It's like, oh my God, she thinks unicorns are real. So that's a very, very good This American Life episode. Definitely has had me in hysterics back in the day. But yes, so this is the OODA loop. Yeah, Charlie. I am so sorry that I have not heard of it. And I could have, should have. There's just no. I got nothing to say.
Inexcusable.
Basically.
Yeah.
Inexcusable. I would say it won't happen again, but it's probably happening right now. So I'm probably missing something else.
I don't know. I feel like anytime there's some sort of like concept that's everyone who's extremely online is aware of, and someone doesn't know about it, I find it kind of charming, and I find it to your credit. So.
Thanks. I think
Brian, you're quiet and charming. What an episode this is.
No, Brian, I think you're apologizing, and you should be. I think you should be studied. I think that how can one live in such isolation? That's all I want to understand. But okay,
what is it like in those caves that you've been living in?
I know. I want to try out all sorts of other flashcards to see what you don't recognize. I actually don't want to do that experiment. But okay, so the OODA loop, to kind of get back to the subject at hand here, Charlie. So this is observe, orient, decide, act. And I mean, this is like right up my alley. Why haven't I heard of this thing? So the observe is clearly the kind of that gathering of data. And then would it be your kind of thrust that like orient is in that visualization? Where does the visualization piece kind of lie in here?
Well, I think the key is mostly that the benefit of the OODA loop, when it comes down to it, is the fast cycle time. It's I think the idea was that it was from the Vietnam War, and pilots who could run this cycle faster would be able to have more success in dogfights. And I could have my facts wrong, but the idea is that the faster you can place yourself and place the enemy and figure out how you can sort of control the situation and run that cycle as quickly as possible, then you could control it and you could be more successful. And so same sort of
like Tom Skerritt, welcome to Top Gun for GNU plot vibes. Is that the?
That's right, gentlemen.
It's the gutsiest plot I've ever seen, man. So yeah, interesting. So into the speed of running that loop, and then how does visualization kind of? Because I think it's one of the things that's a problem even with good visualization tools is it can feel a bit clunky and in a way when you want to when you're kind of trying to explore data that is where you actually don't know but you're not flying an aircraft. You're actually like trying to explore a problem, and you don't know exactly what you're looking for.
Absolutely. And I think if you're thinking about visualizations and UI, Brett Victor, who posts, I don't know if are you familiar with Brett Victor's work?
I am. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a big fan. But he talks about that idea of the easier you can make it to manipulate what's in front of you, whether that's the data or the code, and you can more rapidly see what are the impacts. So one of his demos that he does is he has like a game, sort of a Super Mario Brothers type game, and he shows like, here's what would happen if you had a slider and you could control the gravity, or you could control these different variables that are in the game mechanics, the physics engine, and by being able to literally visualize on this screen, like you run it. So you have Mario jump across the screen, bounce off a brick, kill a turtle, and then go off the screen to the right. And then you can replay it in this demo that he has, where you're seeing all of the permutations that would happen if you ratcheted the gravity up to 1x, 2x, 3x, 4x, or 0.5x. And it draws on the screen all the positions that Mario would inhabit. So it maintains state, and then it replays it instantly and paints those on the screen so that you can see them. You can see what would the impact be. And you might be, as you're playing it, you might be like, oh, I'm designing this game. I don't know what the right gravity level is for this level or for this character, in this dynamic. And by painting all of them on the screen simultaneously, you can then make the decision, oh, it looks like, a 2x gravity or 2.5 gravity is the right sequence here to make it the right level of challenge, or, however you want to impact the game. Point of all that, seeing all the visualizations, seeing all the stuff happen as quickly as possible lets you make those calls. And I think tying it back into GNU plot, the faster you can, just to bring it home, the faster you can run those cycles, that you can see the real-time rendering, or that you can see it, see your data, you can ask those questions. We talked about earlier about it's helpful for figuring out what questions to ask. If you're not sure what questions to ask, the faster you can run those cycles helps you figure out what questions to ask. Once you've figured out what questions to ask, running those cycles quickly helps you decide, oh, this is the best way to represent this data. This is the best way to show the questions that I'm trying to answer. So in your example,
yeah. Oh, what, that doesn't speak for itself. I mean, yeah, I know it's a little bit. I know the title's a little arcane. Let me actually, and I will drop into the chat the actual PR on which this came up, so people can kind of get a little bit more context for what we're talking about. Because I was just kind of presenting the plot a bit as a fait accompli, but this is where we are trying to improving the performance of a zone install, and trying to understand there's a trade-off between we want to increase the amount of parallelism, but there's a point at which that doesn't make sense. So we're trying to kind of understand what some of these various trade-offs are, and the particular problem we were solving was what do you parallelize. When we do a zone creation, we have to basically create a bunch of files, and how much of that do you want to kick off to another worker versus how much of that do you want to do yourself? So that's what this is kind of, that details aren't hugely important, but the important bit about it is, and the kind of the challenge of this is that you're expressing a couple of different dimensions. You've got kind of two different approaches. And then for those two different approaches, you've got, you can have a different number of threads. And for each of those threads, you can have a different batch size. So you got a bunch of dimensions. You kind of want to find what's the sweet spot of all this, and what's the best solution. But based on, you would kind of want to quantify it and come up with a. So that's kind of what we were trying to answer here, which is what made it a challenge to kind of visualize, is that you've got a bunch of different dimensions and you don't actually want to be three-dimensional in the way that you do it.
Yeah.
And then in terms of because I've always felt like visualization can provide us new insight. And I mean, I think flame graphs obviously you've used flame graphs, Adam. Troy, I don't know if you've used flame graphs at all.
Yeah.
This is a Brendan Gregg invention from back in the day. From maybe 2012 or something like that.
On my end, some in front-end performance, you'll see them sometimes in terms of browser, rendering. It's trying to render the page, and what are the cycles? What are the different pieces of the page that are taking the longest or running, n times n times. It's sometimes we use it, but there's a lot going on, and I always feel like I don't know enough about what I'm looking at to decipher it completely.
Yeah, and the origin story of flame graphs. This was at Joyent, where Brendan developed that with us. And he was trying to look through gtrace output with aggregating on UStacks, and you're looking at a bunch of stack traces that are like pretty similar, and you're like, I really want to be able to aggregate these things together, but the way that I aggregate them together has to be a bit fuzzy. And what the flame graph is essentially doing is saying, like, look, I'm going to take all of these stack traces, I'm going to then kind of sort them by I'm going to sort them by their order effectively, and then I'm going to be able to visualize where I'm actually spending a bulk of time, because you can have a function that is actually responsible for a lot of work, but because it's delegating a bunch of work that's going deep into the stacks as you're using a profile provider or what have you, you're not actually seeing the weight as it should be. And so flame graphs allow you, and I know Matt is here and has used, I use flame graphs a lot. Flame graphs are a very useful visualization.
And Brian, you guys started using that with dtrace. When you first saw that, you must have just been like, yeah, that's it. Like that's the right way to think about this.
Yeah, I think that we were definitely like trying to solve problems. So I think I felt the same way we did when we started using heat maps at Fishworks, Adam, where it's like, okay, this seems like a really useful way of visualizing latency. So in that problem, it's like we were latency up until that point. I think we pioneered using visualizing latency as a heat map. I'm not totally sure about that. So I'm sorry if I've offended anyone who prior to 2006 was visualizing latency with heat maps, but I don't really, certainly the state of the art was to look at like the average, and for latency, it's really bad because the average is completely untrue to what you're actually seeing. And we started using heat maps, it was really valuable and a really good way of seeing you. And we saw all sorts of crazy stuff. Adam, you remember looking at some of those, and Brendan used to call them latency art, where we saw truly bonkers stuff in those visualizations.
Yeah, we were talking about that on a show. I'll put it in the notes when I figure out which one, but we were looking at some of that latency art a few episodes ago.
Yeah, did we talk? Hopefully we talked about like the icy lake and the rainbow pterodactyl. You remember the rainbow pterodactyl? I just think
it was in the Nagel episode with Matt.
Oh, with Matt.
Because we were seeing kind of similar dichotomies, I think.
Oh, Matt's like, you guys are always talking about the rainbow pterodactyl. I don't think there's an episode where you haven't talked about the rainbow pterodactyl.
That's right. And LLMs, it's kind of a theme.
With flame graphs, when we saw that, definitely very, and we were making use, like the heat maps for latency, we were able to have flame graphs be useful on props. And the thing I loved about flame graphs, I loved the fact that, like a GNU plot is not telling you how to gather data, right? It's not actually however you gather the data, like I need the data in some form, and then you tell me how to kind of ingest it and format it. And I will say that among my like GNU plot hot tips, by the way, the set data file separator is very useful, Adam. If you ever
what does this do?
It allows you to change the delimiter that you use in GNU plot, which is really useful. Anyway, but I really like that aspect of flame graphs, and I tried to. Charlie, have you looked at state maps? This kind of bonkers visualization that I did. I don't know if you've ever looked at this.
No, I don't think I have.
Okay, so I put a couple of state maps on. There are some state maps on that ticket on the PR. You're going to need to go actually. This is where I have. Well, okay. First of all, a couple of things. Have we talked about my pronunciation of Svig here, Adam? I'm not sure. Surely we have.
No, I don't think so. Is it Svig, or are you saving the real pronunciation for now?
I think I'm the only human on the planet. I think everyone who's pronouncing it Svig, I think you can trace to me. I think
caught it from you. That makes sense.
I think I'm the typhoid Mary of Svig. I think everyone else says SVG, and I don't know why I can't.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
This makes so much more sense. I wasted a whole week figuring that out.
What is the purpose of language if not to communicate? Maybe Yeah, I'm sorry, Charlie. It is an SVG, I guess.
I've caught up. I'm good now. I'm good now.
This is not like a GIF versus GIF thing where reasonable people can disagree. This is like just me versus everyone else. So I'm really sorry. And then I feel bad when I hear someone else say Svig. I'm like, you're getting that from me. I'm really sorry. Like no one else. Charlie's gonna not know what you're talking about until you spell it out. So yeah, sorry.
We're good.
We're good. All right, you caught up. So I mean, the thing I love about Svigs is that you've got. Have you ever played around with Svigs, Adam? Where are we? Have you ever messed around
like the data format, like actually programming one? No, but I can see that they are like, I'm sure they are Turing complete. Like I'm sure they
100%.
You do almost anything in them.
You've got full DOM manipulation in there.
Hmm.
So you can create a data file that has a program associated with it. And I'm like,
what is that? What is the language? What does that look like?
It's just
interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
GitHub chooses not to execute this JavaScript, by the way. GitHub is like, yeah, you're like, I'm taking this image, but this JavaScript can go jump in a lake. That's why you have to actually go, if you want to go look at this thing, you actually need to go like download it and then pull it up in like Chrome as in the file browser.
Yeah.
And then you
seems
can
reasonable, by the way. I mean, to like not just, execute random unchecked code.
It is reasonable. It is reasonable. And yet it is reasonable, but I think that like it's really powerful to have a programming language like that is part of the data. Is really neat.
Totally.
And so here's the problem that I was trying to and Charlie, I would love to know that that I have missed something basic in some visualization tool, because I'm sure that I have. The problem that I felt I had over and over again is kind of the problem that I felt we had with latency before heat maps, Adam, where we've got a bunch of different things in the system and they are in different states at different times. And I think the time is relevant, but I don't know how to visualize that. And so what state maps do is they say like, all right, look, I was trying to I very much drew inspiration from Brendan's work with flame graphs in that tried to separate out the thing that consumes the data from the thing that generates the data. So however you get this collection of entities and states and times, the state map code can then go visualize that with time on the x-axis. And then you can go, and then each entity is kind of a block and you can see where and so I've seen really, really interesting stuff with this, but I've never used it to debug a problem before. And this has like always been like nagging at me. Like, have I created Napoleon? Charlie, we were talking about it in the office the other day. Have I created Napoleon's March to Moscow? Adam, do you know what I'm talking about? About the Tufti
Yes,
thing?
yes. Like is it Tufti? Is it I've been saying Tufti like a.
I'm sure it's tough.
Well, we're back into the GIF versus GIF, although.
Well, but this is a man, so like
this is a man who pronounces his name in a certain way. I think he pronounces it Svig, is what I think he pronounced. That's my guess. And I even took a course from him. I really should have I wonder.
Did he not? He didn't introduce himself or anything. It's like I need no introduction. Let us begin class.
It was about like that, I think. Yeah, that was bad.
Actually. Because Charlie, you did this too, right?
I did, yeah.
And I think Adam is actually kind of spot on. I don't actually recall a whole lot of like preamble. He's kind of like right in. And I really liked it, but I didn't know how to apply it to I mean, like sparklines, I think make a lot of sense. But I don't know, Charlie, did you feel the same way that like this stuff is amazing, but it's more art than insight? It was the problem that I struggled with. That seems too reductive, but
no, I think absolutely. I think there are a couple of key concepts that he does go over that you can apply broadly. But I think that I think there are two main responses to Tufti. I think some people think he's absolutely brilliant and they're sort of like in awe of his, genius, and then other people are like, the emperor has no clothes on, and I don't really see what the big deal is. I personally like him. I think he's got some good stuff. Although I think he might also be riding on a couple of his chestnuts a little too long. One of his things is like,
yeah, I would say he definitely does not suffer from low self-esteem. I think does that feel safe to say? I mean, I think maybe in moments he does, but he does not on stage. He doesn't.
And to your point about art, I think he identifies. I think he's like his main thing is that he's an artist, and then he's sort of been able to bring that art into understanding data, but I think he has like several large scale art pieces up in Connecticut, on some giant farm that he's got or something like that.
Which I think is super. I think it's great. I think that the art is amazing, but it doesn't. And so and Troy, do you want to describe what the Napoleon, the kind of this famous thing he's got on the cover of I think Visualizing Data, right? Of Napoleon's march to Moscow and back.
Yeah, so it's so for those who aren't familiar, and I'm sure anyone who's spent any time in the visualization or UI world has sort of seen this. But yeah, it's a you know what? Let's someone post it in the chat. It'd be good if we could. I'll try and do it from memory, but essentially what it's doing is it's showing Napoleon. Yes, thank you, Adam. But for the benefit of people who are not looking at the chat right now, it's a Napoleon marched into Russia in 1812, 1813, and it was over the winter. And
what can go wrong, you ask?
Right. Well, who wouldn't?
Who wouldn't?
And as you might expect, his army suffered tremendous losses, just absolute tremendous losses, and it was this real war of attrition. And they weren't even in battles so much as it was just the cold that was taking them out. I think someone. And I'm sorry for not giving credit, but somebody was mentioning that there were, they kept journals of which nation, which horses were the tastiest as they ate them across across Russia and back. And what this
very good tie back. This is a very good callback to an earlier episode when Adam and I described our attempts to eat horse in Belgium. Adam, you and I were in the wrong country. We should have been. We should have been donning Napoleonic uniforms.
Oxide and Friends road trip.
Sorry, bro. I mean, you have to understand. You can't just like casually mention eating horse here and then move on to the next sentence. I mean,
yeah, we've got to cite it properly.
Anyway, please, Prithvi, go on.
Of course. So what you have in this chart, this visualization, is that it's showing the size of Napoleon's army as they move into Russia and then eventually turn around and head back home. And what you start with is and it shows a very wide band that at various points splinters off, and you have little smaller bands that this regiment moved off, or I don't actually know military the scale of different force sizes, but you'll have part of the army that splinters off and then they go on a different campaign, and as the winter goes on, you have the army getting the band gets narrower and narrower and narrower, and so that's what you have, and then it moves back, and then by the time it gets back, it's just this fraction of the size of what it began as you had all these hundreds of thousands of soldiers dying.
I think what's neat about this image is like the x-axis is not something you would. It's not time. The x-axis is like where you are. It's like the Cartesian coordinate of where the army is, and the y-axis is kind of what its latitude is effectively, and the width of the line is the size of the army, right? And yes. So you get it, but and then they kind of use color to separate out going to Moscow versus returning, and it's cool. I think it's amazing. I mean, obviously,
yeah. In terms of information density, in particular, right? Like it tells a story.
It tells a story.
Absolutely. And that highlights one of Tufte's main things is this idea.
I think we should announce it before this podcast is right. I'm so sorry.
Right. I'll just say Tufte, so I don't distract.
Yeah, please.
But he one of his main things is that you want to reduce what he calls non-data ink. So if you think of a chart, a bar graph or something like that, he will very often, when he draws things out, he will present a bar graph that's conventional as Excel might design a bar graph, and then he'll show a redone version of it where he removes what he calls the non-data ink, and we might think of it as like chrome or sort of decoration, filigree, but anything that doesn't help you tell the story of the data. And I think what he has highlighted with this illustration, and I think this might be his redrawing of the original, but even the original he highlights as one of the best data visualization data visualizations ever created. And I think that might be a little dramatic, but it is neat, and it's certainly iconic, and has now sort of established itself, especially because of his his vote of confidence in it as a real known,
canonical,
iconic.
error, iconic, a visualization that's telling you all these kind of dimensions of data in a single visualization.
Yeah.
And I mean, I do that, and I think it's really interesting. And again, I don't know. I think the thing I struggled with is like, okay, so meanwhile, back in our gritty reality, we're trying to solve a couple different kinds of problems. And I mean, Charlie, one of the problems that you are grappling with and have historically grappled with is like, how do I present something to the user of the system that is hitting that visual cortex and allow them to explore the system a bit? And you versus and we're obviously like GNU plot is emphatically not the answer. Versus I think some of the things we do where we're trying to understand the system itself is like, okay, and what Matt is doing, say with flame graphs, or what we're doing with state maps, or we're doing with GNU plot, where it's like I'm really just trying to get insight into the data, which seems to me like these are very different use cases. It feels like.
Absolutely.
Because D3 is not going to be something that I would use as a software engineer to visualize data. I don't think, even though D3 is amazing, but I don't think. I assume, Charlie, you've used D3, I assume, or what would have been some of your go-to frameworks when you're looking at visualizing data?
Yeah, I have used it a little bit, but not in a while and not extensively. To be honest, the things that I find the most helpful are more tend to be more drawing apps. They aren't as much the let me program something. But I find that anytime I can find that data, bring it to the surface, and then understand it, whatever the tool is that's in front of me. But yeah, like even Adobe Illustrator would be something that I'd find useful to take that data and represent it. But I think the downside to that is that, again, very often you have to kind of know what you're looking at. You have to know the data, as opposed to saying, let me throw all of these things, as you did with yours, let me throw all this data that I've got into some sort of script that will allow me to bring the key elements to the surface.
And does Illustrator allow you to do that? Are there? I mean,
no. Okay. No, and I think that's the downside. Is
that are you laughing? I think that's a good question. That's not a good question.
I think it's a great question. I think it's just absolutely.
I just feel like every Adobe product has got like 8 different programming languages in it. That's my view of having not really used them very frequently. Is that not right? Is that not an accurate view?
No, I think that's probably right, and I think they've all been deprecated or they're about to, and you're using the wrong one.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So sorry, Charlie. Go on. What are some of your other tools and go-tos? So you use Illustrator for that kind of free hand drawing, and then are you like? Because I know you've used like Sparklines in the past, and have you?
Yes. Yeah. So so Sparklines for those of you who are, and I think somebody in the chat mentioned earlier, but yeah, basically a Sparkline is a word-sized graphic that highlights data, and you could use it to, say you're talking about stock prices, you could have this word-sized graphic that shows essentially a line chart that can fit within the context of the story that you're trying to tell. That covers it.
You get a nice information density, I think, is the idea with Sparklines, where you can look at a lot of stuff simultaneously, which I've always tried to like, how do you allow that visual cortex to do what it does really well, which is like sifting through a bunch of fuzzy stuff quickly to find patterns?
Absolutely. And to be honest, I think one of the nice things about a simple visualization like that is that you can use very simple tools to do it. For Sparklines, I've honestly just in the past used plain JavaScript and CSS, and you can kind of create a very simple, it's essentially the same thing that you'd be using SVGs for now, or SVIGs if you prefer.
Oh, don't humor me. It's such a road one. It really is. So I accepted that.
And you're throwing that data into a function, and it just will render that on the screen. But it's very simple, but it's quick and dirty, and it does the job. And then you can think about the data that's in front of you and figure out what to do with it.
Yeah, interesting. And then I know someone else in the chat pointed to some of the visualizations that things that Kate did on Twitter has done using dot a lot, which I also think is, and a graph is. I know some of the folks in the chat have mentioned graph is, which I have found graph is to be great sometimes for sure, and then other times more of a challenge. I don't know, Adam. What is your experience with?
Yeah,
with
I mean, same. I haven't used GraphViz with ChatGPT or in the ChatGPT era, but I suspect it would kind of create less frustrations if I had, that trusted, I guess, expert looking over my shoulder.
There is some GNU plotty aspects to it, isn't there? Where you're kind of you're feeling like I know that this tool can do more, and I'm not quite getting it.
Yeah.
That's a good call. I should use, because it is helpful when you're looking at a graph and trying to understand a relationship. But I've always found that like when you've got a lot of data, it really gets bogged down, understandably, because it's like it's a really pretty grindy problem. And I also
we talk about this dichotomy between when you're trying to learn from your data versus teach with your data.
Yes.
When you're looking at data to try to find the patterns or engage your visual cortex or reveal the secrets or whatever, and then the data visualization we have when we sort of have the answer and we want to put it on a platter for somebody else. Like when we've done the OODA loop stuff, Charlie, that you were referring to, and now we've basically got it figured out. We want to highlight some of these things. Brian, the thing that I probably have used most in that former category is the dtrace quantize visualization. I'm sure this has got to be true for you. I mean, I know that like a bunch of asterisks in lines in the terminal is sort of like a poor man's
those are
data visualization.
Signs. I'll have you know, those are at signs.
Oh, pardon me. Yeah, I guess I haven't been using it for a minute. But like, I have learned so many things looking at those little microscopic graphs.
That's actually a really good point. And so kind of the history of that's actually so those histograms actually are from Lockstat.
Oh, really? Right.
Yeah. So that was this is way back in the day. So this is prior to dtrace. Jeff Bonwick was a mentor to us both. But Jeff had done this tool called Lockstat where he was trying to give performance information to do performance analysis in a parallel system and understand, in particular, when you want to understand something like block times or hold times. And Jeff had already learned the hard way that like actually looking at the average is not helpful. I really need to see a little bit of a histogram. And so he just did this kind of power of two binning with at signs as the kind of the block to fill in the graph. And so because we wanted dtrace to basically be able to replace all I viewed Lockstat as kind of like an interesting pre-study of dtrace in a lot of ways. And so that's where the quantize and comes straight from that. And from
Brian, you got to remind me there. I always like reach for this and then need to look in the code to find for it. There is a way to do packed aggregations, like using ANSI symbols, if I remember. They're almost like spark lines, actually.
They are like spark lines, and it is the agpack option minus X agpack. Yeah, and I will I'll dig up the blog entry I've got on
nice.
all of this on being able to because being able to visualize aggregations and actually it's funny and Adam really should have been thinking about that stuff coming in here, but I was kind of thinking about some things like flame graphs and state maps and so on. But we've actually been using ASCII to visualize stuff, and it's really important. And because that is where we end up taking a lot of like, you're again doing these like super quick turns. Like I'm not trying to create a graph for a board deck to, or I'm not trying to create you beat me to it. Yeah, you got the link there. I'm really just trying to like understand this and visualize it in a different way. And yeah, that's been really, really important. And so I think we've got agpack is further down there. It does look, Charlie, if you take a look at that, you'll see it looks a lot like spark lines where you're just trying to increase that information density. And And it's, like a lot of things, it's not always, it's not exactly what you want first, but it's nice to have that ability. I got to put ChatGPT on this. You think you're so clever at GNU plot. Can you do ag pack? Can you ag hiss GPT?
That's
Well,
right.
ag zoom action. It's been really, those ASCII visualizations have been really valuable. I think we'd be also remiss not to mention Ratatouille on the Rust side, as long as we're talking about, and I did some work for the humility dashboard to visualize what the service processor is doing. And have you used Ratatouille at all, Adam?
I haven't, but it's been really cool. And one of our colleagues is working on some cool visualizations on that for holistic rack data. But yeah, I mean, is that using like Braille characters?
Yes.
Do I infer that right? In order to draw sort of fine lines in the terminal?
Yeah. Yeah, it uses like the Braille character set, and that is and super easy to use. Like it's really not. I mean, I'm not like it's doing all of the heavy lifting there. I'm really doing nothing. It's pretty great actually.
Yeah, it's a really neat one.
And that's a Rust library.
What was that one called?
That's Ratatouille, formerly TUI RS, but they rebranded. As and Adam, I'm not sure have you ever used state maps?
No, I've never used state maps. Like I've seen them, especially when you guys at Joyent were talking about them. I think you had some cool printouts at the office, if I'm not remembering incorrectly. Like,
I don't know if we ever got printouts of the office state maps. We definitely did. Certainly did flame graphs, and then also what you're thinking of is the stuff that Brendan did, where he was using GraphViz to make these gigantic graphs of these process relationships across many machines, which is super interesting. And he had at one point papered an entire wall of the office with these things. I would say that this problem that we had trying to understand in particular, we were trying to understand why, in terms of, because there are a couple of things happening on the PR that I referenced earlier, but we were trying to understand why increasing the parallelism was not having as much of an effect as we thought it should. And state maps were really, really useful for showing you that actually you're not increasing the parallelism, you're getting Amdahled, right? The Amdahl's law. God, we're doing this again. Man. Sorry, what a mess. But I don't even know which one I say, actually. Now I'm not even
You've confused yourself.
So whatever. But I do refer to getting Amdahled, so I don't know, maybe it's Amdahl's law. But the idea that like you can make a system is going to be ultimately bottlenecked by its serial components, not its parallel components. And this was actually a great place where it's like, hey, I was able to see this. It was actually nice to be able to really debug a problem or see it with state maps, because I feel like that was the bit I feel I've historically been missing with state maps. Dtrace, we obviously debugged lots and lots of problems, but I kind of don't have, I need to be convinced that something is not merely art or curiosity by actually providing new real insight. And what I found with state maps is like, it kind of did the opposite, where I would get these like new questions of like, what the hell is that? And it's like stuff that's actually not relevant to the problem at hand, but I would still want to understand like, what is going on here? And maybe I'm not giving myself enough credit in that. Like, it was a lot of interesting phenomena that we were able to visualize. And you're able to visualize, because in particular, what you're able to visualize when you have like these kind of parallel thundering herds, that can be really hard to see any other way, is what I found. I couldn't find, it was like really hard to visualize a thundering herd, but a state map allowed me a way to do that. But they haven't really caught on, which is, needless to say, flame graphs.
Well, I mean, it did take you like 10 years to like learn something from one. So, but maybe still a visualization technique that's useful to have in your backpack.
Not quite 10 years. It's just like 20 weeks. So it was actually the first time I fell in love with Rust was when I re-implemented state maps in Rust. It was like my first kind of discovery about how great Rust was. So
nice.
State maps always have a special place in my heart, and I'm glad that they're actually they're proven to be slightly useful, at least maybe if only to me. And then Charlie, are you much of a GNU plot user? Or how do you, when you want to plot data, what do you use?
Yeah, I've actually never used GNU plot.
Yeah, that's you're in a safe space. That's all. I think that I do think that you may want to experiment with it. I think you may
Absolutely.
get ChatGPT. There were a couple others. Adam, did you see that we had some folks online replying with things that they used that were interesting? Did you?
I'm sure I did see that.
Yeah. So one of them was Seaborn, which I have also not used. I'm not sure if folks have used the stuff and want to. Have you used R at all, Adam?
No, I really should though. I feel like that'd be up my alley. I think so. I feel like I've heard enough R hype that I want to see what's there.
I'm not sure if Matt is still, I don't know, I'm not sure about Matt and audio issues or just departed, but I'd be curious because I know Matt uses a Python library. Matt PyLib? No, what is it? Matt Scilib? What is the Matt? Matt is in math though, not as in Matt Gator. I don't know. He uses a Python library, I think, to generate his plots. So like I think it's with ggplot2. Is that the?
Yeah, I see someone on Mastodon want to hype that.
And I have not quite gotten into. And then there was another one that I want to find. Paraview. You heard of this one?
No,
I haven't heard of that.
Okay, so I went to like Google this and I'm like, this seems like pretty great actually. It's called Paraview. I'll drop in the chat, and seems pretty interesting. With I don't know. So this one I really want to play around with. I'd be very curious if there are software engineers who are playing around with Paraview as part of their
Oh wow.
Are our systems amenable to this kind of visualization? I mean, clearly, like this is a lot of the physical sciences clearly, are material science and so on. Are synthetic systems amenable to this kind of visualization? Because it certainly seems awfully neat. But okay, Charlie, it makes me feel better that you also had not heard of it.
I haven't, but I bet Ben has.
Ben's our colleague in the UK. And someone, it's Matplotlib. Yes, thank you. Those in the chat are pointing out Matplotlib, which I don't think is Matt Gator, but maybe it is.
You never know, right? You
never know exactly. So I'm kind of curious to know, but it sounds like it's also crickets out there. No one else has actually used Paraview either.
Wow.
So
Paraview comes out of the national lab. Cyndia, Los Alamos. It's cool. I didn't realize that.
Doesn't it seem neat? It seems really cool.
Crazy neat. That seems really cool.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like it's the kind of thing where we're gonna catch the right person, and it's gonna be like the OODA loop all over again. It's gonna be like, what are you talking about? You haven't seen this, because it seems like it's a pretty neat thing. But anyway, so no one's used that. But I would be curious about what are some other tools that folks are using as part of that's really in the loop for them when you're trying to visualize data. And as someone else had asked earlier, Adam, I'd be curious your take on it. Like, should data visualization be a part of the undergraduate computer science curriculum? And I mean, obviously,
that's a great question. I mean, yeah, I mean, it seems like what I've often wanted in undergraduate computer science programs is the fill up the tool belt kind of thing, right? Like nobody's going to teach you awk or sed or Perl or whatever in a lot of your classes, but like having some of those things, like knowing that JQ is a thing, like it seems like data visualization would be another really useful one of those tools for like not becoming incredibly sophisticated in it, but having just enough so that you know what to reach for.
It feels like a great
like throw it into a graph. You should be able to like throw stuff, be able to just do some basic visualization really fluidly. I think it's a really important part of when you're trying to understand, especially the performance of a system, but just in general.
Yeah, it feels like a great J-term class.
We could do. So is a J-term? What's a J-term?
Oh, Charlie? Sorry. Just if as an undergraduate, when sometimes you'll have like a fall semester and a spring semester, you might have like a 1 month abbreviated window in the middle where they could throw I don't want to say electives, but things that are maybe not quite as germane to the primary degree that you're focusing on. So Not all schools have those. But it'd basically be like some sort of short-term seminar that teaches you about different topics like data visualization or like Adam's saying.
I did not have that Adam and I did not have that as undergrads. And I was always super jealous of schools that did that. I'm not sure how. Like, I know that Williams did it, and clearly, Charlie, you got an alma mater that did. I'm super jealous because I think that would be. You're right. This would be like a great. This is what you want. You want like a couple of week thing, and not a. This does not need to be an entire semester, but it feels like you could really do some really neat stuff. GL Viz is that Todd has dropped in the chat also looks really interesting. I just feel like this is where there's a lot of. I just feel like I'm not caught up on this. I still feel like I'm missing stuff in terms of the state of the art for. There's so much that's kind of out there for visualization. And Adam, have you ever used like proprietary tools like Tableau and so on?
I have used Tableau. My brother worked at Tableau for a long time, so I actually tried to get him to join tonight, but it was overlapping with young kids needing to be fed, so I let him feed my nephews. I guess that's fine.
Were you using Tableau only as a way of taunting him? Were you trying to find?
Just filing bugs. Exactly.
Yeah, just filing needless bugs on using documentation or whatever.
That's right. No. I mean, I'm using it for like some cool kind of like navigating through data. Like taking big chunks of data and trying to distill it into things that sort of made sense. I don't think I really used it in anger in terms of work productivity stuff. More in the realm of evaluating Simpsons episodes. Which I know is also hypercritical. Don't get me wrong.
I mean, I'm at the edge of my seat. Go on. I mean, I clearly not.
Is there a better use of it? I don't know.
I assume that's where they make most of their bucks. But yeah, I use Tableau again, like not in anger, but to look at some data and draw some interesting conclusions. But it's proprietary platforms are so tricky, right? Like in Tableau was particularly tricky because a lot of it was oriented around, it was sort of like our CAD tools in a way. It was oriented around the Windows desktop user as the author of these things. And they've since moved into a lot of more modern web technology stuff. But a bunch of these visualization tools seem to be grounded in a slightly earlier era.
So what were you trying to do with Simpsons episodes?
Blah 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 blah. What were you trying to do? I think the same thing that most of my mental caloric budget goes into, which is figuring out which ones were the best and how many of the Lisa episodes were redeemable and stuff like that.
I feel like we should. For the first time, I have felt that my 11-year-old should join Oxide and Friends. I have got to say, she's got some pretty impressive insights on. We've been going through some top Simpsons lists, and she's got some. I've also got some real opinions on underrated episodes. And so no, I'm at the edge of my seat. So go on. What did you find?
I think nothing conclusive. I think as with many data visualizations, it was mostly useful for reinforcing my pre-existing biases about the Conan O'Brien era being the best.
The Conan O'Brien era, I think is the best. Yeah, for the Simpsons. Yeah, because I think it does get very spotty. And there's some. I mean, obviously, season 4 is just nails, but I think that there's some real underrated ones. Where are you? I mean, where does Grimes come out on this, for example? Oh, there and you dropped. Yes, yeah. This is the full IMDb visualization, which I think is actually very helpful.
Yeah, I will actually even maybe link this in the video, but certainly post it in the show notes. But I've dropped a link to if you search up IMDb and the Simpsons chart, you'll get to this thing. And this is a very simple kind of Excel, conditional formatting of stuff, but it really shows you the what the users of IMDb think of it. Well, I'll tell you what conclusions do you draw from this?
Well, you can see the clip shows. You can see the first 2 clips.
The
first 2 clip shows you can see from space.
Season 6, episode 3.
Yep, that's
And
season 6, episode 3.
season 9, episode 11.
That's right. Are the and I mean, there's a little bit of like internet dogpile on like I actually don't think, especially that first clip show, is not quite as bad, but they do break the fourth wall a bunch, and there are a bunch of reasons to not. But yeah, I think this is a good. I like this visualization. I think this is a good visualization. I also feel, Adam, as you must feel, that it is far too charitable to late seasons.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched that many like actual late seasons, but yeah, I feel like it's overly generous.
Well, and actually, this is like I talk about another data visualization, a very famous one in terms of the returning aircraft in the Pacific, right? That's got the bullet holes in it.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
And there's where you're not correcting for selection bias in that visualization. So the visualization is kind of, it's not showing you what you think it's showing you. That it is say that that because it is only, I'm sure many folks have seen this, but because the visualization is only of returning aircraft, not lost aircraft, it is actually not telling you which bits need to be reinforced with more armor because the aircraft was shot in those bits and managed to return. It's the bits that are not shot. It's like those are the bits that need more reinforcing armor. And I assume that that's all true. You know, is that true? By the way,
someone posted the backstory. Having not read it, I choose to believe it. Certainly.
No, but like, is this like a Malcolm Gladwell thing, or is this like? So you've dropped what feels like a canonical link, Charlie?
Yeah. So Cameron Mall is a designer. He's has worked in various places. Worked for Facebook. Worked for a couple different places. And he was sort of on the speaker circuit back in the early 2000s. And I just skimming this blog post, it looks like it was around early 2000s. He reads about it. 2005, he's giving a talk and he presents this. So yeah, he was the one who sort of presented it, and then it sort of took over as another iconic visualization on the web in the early 2000s.
Okay, this is really interesting. Also, this is a blog entry after Adam. This is a blog entry after our own heart because it does not have HTTPS enabled. So you go to click on it. Chrome's like, this is like 100% spam. Like, you do not want to go here. I mean,
look, dtrace.org now with HTTPS, new and improved.
dtrace.org, new and improved 100% because of you. Thank you so much. Because dtrace.org was this kind of like a tire fire where you had to go to advanced settings to go to it because you had to confirm that you wanted to take your life in your own hands.
Go to a notary. We shout out a John Funk, listener of the show too, who actually did that work. I was just the one who had the idea of paying him to do it.
Well, it was a great idea. It was a genius. He did terrific work on it. Really, really appreciate it. But so this is Charlie. This is really interesting because this actually. So he's actually really explaining like, sorry, this is due to me. And the aircraft is actually when he just like took an aircraft that he felt was going to be kind of more attractive, and it's like, no, that's actually not the right one, which is interesting. But it sounds like the point was not wrong. Is that
no? I think the point was correct. It was a the easy what your eyes are drawn to here is that we got to reinforce where all those red dots are and then they'll come back, and it's like, no, those are the ones that didn't come back. And I'm just repeating what you said, but the ones that came back, they survived. Like they were quote unquote fine. The ones where there are not the places on the plane where there are not bullet holes, those were the fatal bullets. And so that's what we need to reinforce those locations so that those planes actually make it back. As long as the plane comes back, that's success. If it doesn't come back, that's not success.
And to put this back into Simpsons terms, the fools that are giving season 33, episode 2, a 7.0 on IMDb are fools. That's why they're watching the episode. You and I would never watch that episode.
Although I don't know. I think there's like a train wreck aspect to it. Like I sort of want to see like how bad could it be? Are
you speaking like metaphorically or literally? Have you actually watched any? I mean, have you done this experiment?
I have not. No,
well, you should try it.
It was only by Adam's posting this that I was able to appreciate how answer to those questions of like, what is the worst episode? And now I am sort of perversely intrigued.
You will find it just to be excruciating, painful. You would be just traumatic. This is all it's going to be. And this is, I mean, that very much reminds me of our dubious movie of the month club, Adam. This is unfortunately not everybody. Have we talked about it?
Yes, we have. I mean, it's been like 2 or 3 years, I think, since we brought it up, but not the first time we've mentioned this on the show.
Oh my God. Charlie, do you know about this? You're gonna
I
be like,
don't.
what are you working with these absolute idiots? There was a very bad idea that was had by neither Adam nor me, but by my colleague that talked us both into it. So we bear complete responsibility of whenever a movie comes out that is potentially the worst movie ever made, we would go see it in the theater. And this is one of these ideas. If that even sounds like a good idea, and it like
Well, not only this, you have if you want to do this, you have to go opening weekend because there is no second weekend. So you need to be really on it. You need to know that this is coming and be ready to go.
And what is your, with no evidence ahead of time, is it like, Sharknado 3? I can make some guesses.
Here. Yeah, we're getting it. We're getting into it. This is good, Charlie. Right. You're asking the questions. You're clearly intrigued by this. Like you're not and you're like, I want to know more. So I will tell you that the number one metric for me personally is it needs to be losing money, which is actually much more unusual than you might think. Which is why Hollywood makes a bunch of stuff that's not very good, because even the stuff that's not very good would, in kind of the era of theater releases, it'd be interesting to know how much this has changed with streaming and so on. But in the era of theater releases, it would still make money because you just put it on enough screens and you do it internationally and these things would make money. But really bad movies will not make money, truly atrocious movies. So it needs to be on its way to not making money. And then it needs to be, and I don't know if we ever formalized this, but I felt like you need to have some reviewer that's saying this is the worst movie ever made. To me,
yes, and no horror movies, because we excluded that because there's so much horror dreck and people just go see horror dreck.
Was that before or after we saw Blood Rain 2 that we said no?
Blood Rain 2, first of all, it was not Blood Rain 2, it was Blood Rain.
Was it Blood Rain? Okay.
Blood Rain after a video game. You could see advertisements on bus stops in San Francisco for weeks and weeks after you could not see it in the theater. And that was not a horror movie. That was a movie based on a video game.
Okay.
It was only horrifying, not actually horror.
I remember it being bad. Ben Kingsley is in it. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yep. No, Gandhi was in that movie. You're right.
You're like, what are you doing here? Like,
mostly voiceover though.
I definitely don't know what you're doing here, Ben Kingsley. You should be really.
Yeah, that's where the budget went.
And so we saw some very, 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 very bad movies this way, Charlie. Obviously, there are. Adam, what stands out to you in terms of the ones we've?
Well, I was going to mention Blood Rain, Hottie and the Naughty, which was the Paris Hilton movie. That movie was notable. I remember opening weekend, I think they made something like $22,000. Not like
it did make, and I'm not sure that it made it to a weekend. I think that one we had to see on a Wednesday.
But I just remember seeing our our $14 exactly was visible in their box office revenue.
Yeah, that movie is atrocious. By the way,
that
movie, if any of this seems that would be funny, none of these movies is so bad that they're good. They are just awful and unbearable. Yeah. And whenever the curtain opens, you're like, what am I doing here? I've done it again. What am I doing here?
Oh yeah.
I think John Travolta we've seen twice at least. We saw him in Battlefield Earth, a very bad movie, and Gotti, and also a very, very bad movie.
Very bad.
Battlefield Earth was the Scientology one, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is. Yeah, and that's kind of not the worst part about it by a long shot. That movie is bad. I still think for me, Gigli stands out though. Gigli is definitely.
Yeah.
Gigli, and Gigli felt like I was around an open can of paint for 3 hours. I just had a headache that didn't go away for 2 days. I swear. I just I didn't feel. It just felt awful. And that one, Christopher Walken was in.
Oh yeah. In very much like the Ben Kingsley and Blood Rain kind of way. It's great that you wandered into the wrong set. We'll shoot it, just improv. It's fine.
It's fine. And he really did
right this way, Mr. Walken.
Yeah.
He had wandered into the wrong set, and he did a 180 pretty quick. He pretty quickly realized I'm wrong movie, wrong door. I'm getting out of here.
Now was he playing wise older? Sage, or what was his?
You asking me plot points of Gigli? It's fine. I just want to I want to just need to be very clear eyed about what you're asking me to do right now, because this is.
Well, do we feel comfortable giving away spoilers? Charlie,
that's right.
Just in case I see it.
the right, in case you see it. Well, can you even spell it first of all? Because this was actually a part of apparently the argument was like what to title it. I believe. Do you remember the alternate title for Geely?
No.
I believe the alternate title was Tough Love.
God.
But Geely it's Gigli because you supposedly want to see it, Charlie. You don't want to give away spoilers. It's terrible. On your Simpsons visualization though, Adam, I did want to bring up another visualization. Did you see Dave Pacheco's Cartlytics?
Oh wow, yeah, I love Cartlytics. Sorry, yes. So we at Fishworks and then I believe at Joyent, you guys had a pretty serious Mario Kart 64 problem. Is that fair to say? And Dave wrote as the world. So Dave wrote this software that would analyze your video, the video of your Mario Kart 64 playthroughs, find points of interest.
Now,
I thought this was his $1 billion idea.
And points of interest, like here's where you played it in a clever way, or like, oh, look at this palm tree.
No.
No.
Okay, so in particular, what he wanted to visualize, and I am really kicking myself for not having Dave on here, but what he wanted to visualize, he had many kind of, okay, well, it's secretly what Dave wanted to show. And sorry, Dave, but you and I both know the truth. Dave is a very good Mario Kart player. And he was looking for new ways to demonstrate that to anyone. To anyone who might think that and so in particular, I think what he wanted to explore was what we called a key thing. Was a key thing at Fishworks or was that at Joyent? I can't remember.
That was at Joyent.
Okay, so Keith was convinced. One of our colleagues was absolutely convinced that he was leading a match for most of the time and would lose in the last seconds, always to Dave. And this happened disproportionately to him. And Dave, who would frequently win in the last seconds, did not think it was disproportional to him. I think if I recall correctly, you've got the quote there, Adam, where he says, we have an example of a hotly debated question. How often does a player go from first to fourth in less than 5 seconds? We call that a key thing. And what the data showed is Keith is right. It does actually happen to Keith more than anybody else. It's like, wow, no, it does happen to you a lot. Wow. And Dave's on the other end of a key thing. Dave was kind of always on the other end. Dave is a very good Mario Kart player. So I didn't, you were asking, or maybe rhetorically, if we collectively had a Mario Kart problem. I felt like Dave was so dominant, and I would just watched so many egos be destroyed at his under his mild-mannered foot that I was never tempted to play, but it was mesmerizing to watch, actually.
Yeah.
But it was a really interesting visualization because he would have what he actually doesn't feature on this blog entry, but he had a really interesting way of kind of visualizing where people were relative in the race at various times, and it was really neat, and it kind of gave us new insight into. I mean, this is some extraordinary way
to bring it home. I love it.
Yeah, but it's like your Simpsons episodes. I think that this is the folks are asking in the picture. So that's actually got there's a photo in there that's got you got Brendan Gregg. This is in Joyent Day, so you got Brendan Gregg and then Robert Bustocki, Bill Pievsky, and Dave. All playing. Dave in his just like very. I mean, you can just tell the guy's a killer in that photo. He's just like
the legend, absolutely,
absolute apex predator, waiting for these gazelles to just like wander over to the watering hole, and he's just absolutely gonna eat them all. I mean, that's just. I don't know. Feels like, and you can see I feel like of those three, only Robert knows what's coming. Robert, you can just see in that picture. There's a look of this like, God, it's gonna happen again. It's like once again, this is where we get eaten. And then Dave spends a lot of time writing visualization software to show how eaten we were, how devoured we were. All right. Well, I love that Simpsons visualization. It's and just in general, I think, Adam, this has been fun.
It has been fun. It's really made me think about like those visualizations you use to tell the story and the visualizations you use to like figure out where the fuck you are.
Yes.
And I'm also realizing that like I don't have enough of those kind of easy, just like at my fingertips ones. And I'm probably leaving some stuff on the table. So I gotta go look into some of these tools that were mentioned, because I think there's a real skill there of just being able to turn the crank faster and like, look at it one way, look at the other way, and derive those insights.
Yeah, I think so. And I would really, again, encourage people to, I think this is an area where LLMs make a huge difference. And ChatGPT is really good at GNU plot, I found. And I would really encourage, it's like, and it's a great way because you can really post the question that you want to ask. I mean, it's like, I'm trying to plot a box plot where I want to highlight things or what have you. And I found that it's really good. And then, yeah, Charlie dropping in the classic Brett Victor inventing on principle. There's a lot of, I don't know how much, if you've watched any Brett Victor, but there's really good stuff out there, Adam. And
nice. No, I haven't.
I think there's a lot of, definitely a lot of overlap with folks that are interested in this podcast. So. All right. Well, hey, Charlie, thank you very much for joining us. This is great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you bet. And we'll be we're working on some exciting visualizations at Oxide that will be part of the product as well. So at some point we're going to come back. I think Charlie, we're going to have you back at some point in the
on the other
future.
side, and we'll have to find a time to get Ben on too, because he's been doing some great work. I'd really like to get his insights in here as well.
Yeah, so I think we will probably schedule this as something that's not like 4 a.m. for him. I think you're like, God, it'd be great to have Ben on it. This is not too inconvenient time. Like, this is pretty much the worst possible time. So we will find a time that works for Ben. I think it's a great idea. Get Ben on here and show some of the stuff that we've been working on. But I think really what we've been focusing on with visualization, I think that always the trick is like, how do you the stuff visualizations that tell a story are great, but especially visualizations that allow you to understand a system better, that convey new understanding. And how do you do that? That's always the challenge.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks again, Tori, for joining us. And Adam, thank you for humoring my GNU plot episode. And then especially for that Simpsons graphic, which I think tells its own story. And yes, you can see. Someone in the chat asks, can you see the principle in the popper, which is where it all comes unglued? And yes, you can. Good stuff. All right. Oh, Adam, we've got one other announcement.
Yes. Book club? Is that the announcement?
Book club. We got a book club announcement. So we've been talking about doing an Oxide book club, and I have a book. So this is this is going to be a little bit, on the one hand, this is not, I mean, I had some constraints, not out of print, which already is like putting huge constraints from my normal reading list in print. But I also wanted something that was kind of that, and Adam, you can kind of correct me if you disagree with this, but I wanted something that would be something that would, the fact that we were reading it together would be kind of a shared motivation to get through it. So something that might be like a little bit tougher, honestly, just for lack of a better word. You know what I mean? Like but not, I wasn't trying to not trying to make it too debilitating. It's something that would also be interesting for our listeners to all read. So what we got is How Life Works, User's Guide to the New Biology by Philip Ball, and we will be tweeting this out as well. I think this is really, really interesting. It's been highly recommended by folks that for whom this is their domain of expertise, namely biologists or microbiologists. And I can tell you, Adam, I don't know if you've started it at all. I wanted to read at least the preface to know, because it's like there's a bit of a trick, right? I don't want it to be a book that you and I have already read, but I also don't want it to be like terrible.
Right.
So we gotta, find that. And the just from the preface, I think this is really gonna hit the spot, because I think a big part of his thesis is that we have been too reductive about the way we have thought about these biological systems, and that they're actually much more complicated than we've given them credit for, and the kind of the metaphors that we've used are the wrong metaphors. So I think this is going to be a really interesting read. It's been highly reviewed. It's not a super easy read for sure. It's definitely a bit of a steep path, but I think the vistas from the top are going to make it worth it. So, Adam, I think we should give ourselves a bit of time to read this. I don't know if you
you thinking like May?
Yeah.
June, May.
Yeah. I think let's do it in May. So before we kind of get into the summer, I do think that we want to give people a pretty solid like 2 months, 2.5 months to read this, just because I know folks have got other things they're going to read, and I think that I'm not a particularly fast reader, and I think this is going to send me anyway. I think this is going to send me quite a bit to be looking up things. So I want to afford other people that same time and luxury. But we'll get an exact date out there. But let's just say if you'd be interested in joining a discussion on it, we'll try to get this wrapped up by May, and then we're going to try to get a guest who can also maybe read it with us and help walk. Because this is obviously, Adam, this is definitely not my domain. It's not your domain. So
Nope.
we're way over our skis here, but that's part of what makes it interesting. And I think that's hopefully folks agree, and hopefully it's going to be can be an interesting motivation to you too to read it and to join us in it, because I think it's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, should be good.
Awesome. All right, and we'll tweet that out as well. So join us on the Oxide Book Club. Maybe we can even cut that as we'll do a little separate micro episode so people can get our perspective on that. But again, it's Philip Ball and How Life Works, a user's guide to the new biology. All righty. All right, well, thanks again, Charlie. Thanks, Adam. And thanks, everyone.